Wow. Yeah, no, and I can tell that you're really enjoying this. Every time we talk, you're so lit up and excited about the things you get to do. And it's so incredible that you're so amazed by all the things that you get to do.
Yeah, it
I
is.
appreciate the excitement.
There's a lot of privilege that you get when you get to become a physician. You know, a lot of recognition for having completed that road, and it is. I try to keep that in mind because it's so easy to just kind of like, well, I'm already there, but you know, kind of keeping that humility, it really allows me to connect well. Let's see, I should be able to get my video going. No. Oh,
You are.
there I am.
Wow, look at you. You grayed in the beard.
It's all the wisdom pushing out the white is what happens there.
Oh, is that what's happening? That's what
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is? We'll call it, we'll go with wisdom. We'll go with wisdom.
That's the best thing to call it. Call it wisdom.
Wow. It's so good to see you, Saul. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Vivs. I am so happy to be here. And this project too. I mean, we had talked about this and the fact that you got it off the ground. I'm so happy. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. For everyone that's here, we thought about this while we were working at the Cameron County Public Health Department, countless hours investigating cases, working really hard, not goofing off at all.
Never goofing off.
Never goofing off. We thought about this when we were in just the worst kind of, it was really difficult. It was a really hard time. And so we dreamed about the things that we would do on the outside while we were there going through all of this. I mean, if COVID was hard for people going through it, I mean, you can imagine how hard it was for the people that had to work through it. And so going through all of that, we really fostered a very strong friendship after going through all of that. And in that time, we were able to dream up many things that we would do when we'd be back out into the real world. And this was one of those things that I'm so grateful that it's something that we've been able to make happen. And I'm so excited to keep this going because this is a really powerful thing. I think that connecting students to people like you, who is so inspiring and motivating, is what we need right now to get people into gear and doing stuff and helping fix the world and make it a better place. Because I mean, that's one of the reasons that I sincerely appreciate and admire you, because you have this view of the way that the world should be, and you consistently make efforts to get it to there. And I so value that. And I thank you so much for being who you are.
Thank you, Vivs. So do you guys have some question for me? Or you just want me to tell you some stories?
Well, first, I think we have a good amount of people here as they come in. We'll let them ask the questions, but the first thing I want to do is introduce you properly. Get a good, nice, proper introduction, because I wrote one. So Saul and I have been good friends since July of 2020 while working at the Cameron County Public Health Department as COVID-19 epidemiologists, where together we investigated individual and community outbreaks and partner with the Texas State Department of Health and the CDC to complete all kinds of crazy investigations. And where am I? And Saul, being the clever person that he is, he put together this incredible, all-powerful Excel master list spreadsheet that to this day contains and informs our Cameron County Public Health Department as to who is infected with COVID, whether it's a reinfection, a breakthrough infection, and all of those things. So you're so awesome. Thank you for all that you do. And now Saul is working on his residency, and he's at the UTRGV Medical Family Medicine at DHR, and he is in his preliminary year in internal medicine. And Saul, you are someone I am incredibly thrilled and honored to introduce to everybody, because you're a really incredible human being who believes in doing the right thing for the sake of the right thing. And that is so unbelievably rare in humans as a quality. And I so value that of you. And so thank you for who you are. I look up to you and I respect you for your tenacity and your radiating positivity. Beaming with knowledge, integrity, generosity, and the cheesiest jokes you will ever hear, I am so happy and humbled and honored to welcome Saul Ruvalcaba, medical doctor. All right. So Saul, I believe Damien had a question for you. Damien, why don't you go ahead and unmute so you can ask your question. Damien, we can't hear you. Oh. Did you put that in the chat? I don't see the question. Okay, I don't see the question in the chat. There you go. Phone's been having problems. Sorry. Do you have a question though, Damien? You can add it to the chat here and someone can address it. Okay, well, while Damien's getting his question together, does anybody else have a question? Don't make me start because I have questions. All right. Okay, how did you learn to distinguish the microorganisms? Is it memorized or do you reference a chart or something? Yes, how do you do it? Or do you call me?
So I do call Vivs very, very frequently. There's a lot, right? You got your different classes, your gram negatives and your positives and your anaerobes and your aerobes and your semi-aerobic or non, like something. There's a bunch. A lot of it is, it's not necessarily memorization as much as the ones that they're going to be showing you in class typically is because those are the ones you're going to come across in life, especially in medicine, right? So once you're doing, you're seeing those infections, Pseudomonas is just always there. E. coli is just always there. And it makes your life easier if you know about the bacteria when you hear about it so that you can start making a plan than going and reading about it and then starting to make a plan. So it's really just, it's that constant exposure and just, why is this one important? Because you see it all the time. And so that helps out a bunch. And then just mnemonic devices. I don't have a particular one that I use. Most frequently, 90% of the time we're coming across just Staph aureus. Is it resistant or not to methicillin? And Streptococcus, different groups of them. So it's really just, it's that frequency has a lot to do with it. And then when you get into the medical field, right, once you start seeing patients, even just being mildly familiar with a thing is going to be a huge advantage. So.
Wonderful. All right. Good question, Damien. So you get to learn the organisms as you go, huh?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Good questions. Does anybody else have another question for Mr. Saul here? Oh, that's very interesting. So far, I've only gotten good at remembering gamma and beta protobacteria. I've learned cutting them into groups does help you, like you said. Yeah, it does, Damien. And we've talked about them in the 1407 lecture that we have. So thank you for your question. If you have any others, please go ahead and submit them. If anybody else has a question, go ahead and ask. Yes. I'm going to have a question here, so let me go ahead and mute here.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alexi. Okay. Hi. Okay, my name is Alexi. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for taking your time out of your day and spending it in the car and talking to us. I appreciate you doing that. So I actually have a question that's I guess a little bit left field, which has nothing to do with microorganisms or anything. It's more concerning. For example, one of the questions that asked about advice you would give to someone who is considering this type of job? I would love to hear that advice, but before we get into that, I have a question concerning, Ms. Viviana mentioned that you all worked at Cameron County and now you're doing your residency and now you're a doctor. Can you tell us more about like your timeline? Because I feel like, at least for me, my timeline has been different. Like I didn't always want to do something in the medical field, so it has taken a few turns. So I don't know if that was always the case for you, if you always had that in mind, and evidently the position at Cameron County seems to be in line with the field still. But that also sounds like you didn't just go from school to residency, or like from one school to the next. Sounds like there was things in between. So if you could tell us about your journey, I would love to hear it.
Definitely. There is a lot. So I'll tell you what, I'll talk about this for like maybe 5 minutes, or if that's too long, then I can cut it down to 3. So just kind of signal me when you want me to stop, because the journey is a long one. I like, and one of the things that, that I think is really important to understand is that medicine it's a long path. Whether you graduated high school, jumped right into it, hit your pre-med things, and then jumped into medical school immediately, and then immediately jumped into a residency, even if you're doing all of that and taking, I guess, what a lot of people would consider maybe the right way, or like, it's still a long path. There is a lot on the way. There's a lot to learn, and medicine is one part of it. It's not everything though, right? So for myself, I graduated high school 2004. I went to study in Monterrey, at the Tec de Monterrey from 2004 to 2009. My father passed away in 2009. In 2000, between 2009, 2010, things got really, really dangerous over there. And so I had to come back to the US. Because I studied in Mexico, I didn't have a bachelor's degree or an associate's. I have one degree. I have a high school diploma, and then I have an MD. I have nothing in the middle. So because of that, I came back over here. I wasn't really able to do much because I didn't have any degrees, right? So I decided to become an EMT, and I appreciate and respect the field, but it is very different in terms of scope and responsibilities and what they want you to be thinking about and doing from medicine. So I had challenges adapting to that. I decided instead to become a welder. So I became a welder, and that was fantastic. Welding is great. It's there's fire and steel and like, and before I got a chance to start working at that, about a year and a half had already gone by, maybe 2 years. And then I had the opportunity to go back to medical school in Mexico. I finished up, graduated in 2015, came to the US from 2015 to 2021, 22. Yeah, because I barely, just started a little while ago. I worked in a whole bunch of different jobs, life insurance. I joined the Texas State Guard. I volunteered for stuff. I met Vivi there at Cameron County, where I originally started as an epidemiology technician, and then they eventually promoted me to a full epidemiologist. And then after that, I worked more in disaster medicine with Willacy County, and then finally I got accepted into the residency program. So it's been a long path. I mean, 2004 to 2015 just to finish medical school and come to the US, and then 2015 to 2022 before I started a residency. That's 2004 to 2022 is almost a 20-year journey. Whew. And so what I like, there's a lot, and I don't want you guys to think that you have to do it that way. You don't have to do it that way. You don't have to do it in 20 years like I did. You don't have to do it in 5 years or 8 years or whatever the minimum amount of time is. Do it in your time. And don't forget that there's so much more, especially if you're going to be going into medicine. There's so much more than the medications and the illnesses. At the end of the day, you're dealing with people, and people are not just the sum of their parts, right? We're more than that. We're complex. We've got a lot of moving bits to us. So keeping that in mind, and there's really, if you're learning to do public speaking and you think to yourself, man, what good is public speaking going to do me when I'm in front of a patient? it's going to help you a lot when you need to talk to that patient and their family, and you need to explain to them that maybe their family member isn't going to be recovering, right? And you need to start talking about end of life issues, or the opposite, right? How to appropriately tell a patient that they're doing well. So many times on TV and in general, right? We focus on these stories of like, wow, yeah, then I had to tell that little kid he had cancer. But if everything goes well, you get to tell that kid that he doesn't have cancer anymore, right? And if you just walk into the room and you're like, okay, well, Alexi, I know you've gone through a lot of chemotherapies, but your cancer's good, so you can get out of here now. All right, thanks. Like, no, we're guides. We're more than just people who treat an illness, right? Doctor comes from docere, docent, teacher, right? We teach people, we guide them, we educate them, and sometimes we hype them up, right? We get confused sometimes. We think that statistics mean that person is going to do poorly, and we forget the basic rule of statistics, which is that it applies to populations and not individuals. So learning all those skills is really, really important. If your path is taking you a longer way, keep working on those skills. And if your path is taking you the fast way too, take time to develop those skills, right? If I can say one thing, it's that the failures that I've had have taught me so much. And chief among those things that I had to learn was how to deal with failure, right? It's in those 2 years that I left, I didn't know I was going to be able to come back. I had to give up on this idea that I was going to be a doctor. And I've wanted to be a doctor since I was like 5 or 6 years old, right? And by that time, I'd sacrificed a lot to get to where I was, and to just say, okay, there it goes, right? That was hard. It hit, right? And also my dad had just passed away, so those two things kind of happened at a similar time frame. And then when the opportunity presented itself for me to go back, I'd already made a plan. I'd already made a life that I was going to be living. I had to ask my fiance permission, essentially, to go back to finish medical school, because I had already told her that we were getting married in like 6 months. And that got pushed back. That movie 5 Year Engagement? I don't know how old that is nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I did a 7-year engagement. I dated my wife 9 years long distance. Right. And believe me, it's not because I wanted to. If I could have the choice between doing that and not doing long distance, right? But that's what was on my path. And whatever's on your path, you have two options. You can look at it and you can say to yourself, man, I wish this was something else, and act like it's something else. Or you can look at it and say, this is what it is, and this is what I'm going to do. Right? So I don't know if I maybe went a bit too tangential there on your question.
No, that was perfect.
Wow.
Okay. Anybody else got questions? Y'all can ask me. Don't worry. There's no such thing as a dumb question. And yeah.
Oh, just before anybody says anything, I just wanted to say thank you for going into so much detail, because that's been really reassuring for my end, because I feel like we all have these different paths, and it has been challenging to try to, see where I stand, also with the realistic questions I have to ask myself, like what are the other applicants and what is in their path. And overall, hearing your story was able to just really give me more hope and aspiration, like, okay, I can do this, and even if it feels distant, like it can still be attained. And it's also nice how you mentioned all of these other extra factors that are you maybe not usually talked about, which are like, because we talk about what the path is to school, and what about the other factors that like is still real life, your father, your wife, or your engaged person at the time, like all of those are other stressors that play a role into how you can focus in your studies. So I think it was very real that you were able to express those complications and still be able to overall succeed, and as you mentioned, like stick to your path, which was also, I think, very like, strong-willed, because as you mentioned, you didn't know at one point if you were going to be able to continue your dream. So I think that's awesome. I'll let somebody else speak, and then I'll ask questions for you. Thank you.
I think I saw something in the chat. You mind if I answer this one, Vivs? How did you handle the stress and or pressure of learning everything, every term for your career?
Go ahead.
Oof. Hold on, let's see. Who asked that question? I forgot the name already. I apologize for that. Gabriela Velasco. Gabriela, one thing at a time. That's it. That's all you can do. You learn one thing, and then you learn another thing, and then you learn another thing, and then you forget a thing. And then you go out with your friends and you say, oh man, I could be learning so many things, but also I'm about to go insane because of all these things that I'm having to cram into my brain. You learn them one thing at a time. For me, one of the things I love to do, I love to break down words. And Vivs, if y'all want to talk to her later about my love of words, I'm sure she'll have plenty of stories. But I will give you one very, very specific example. So when a mother has gestational diabetes, she's producing a ton of insulin, right? Because she's got all this insulin resistance, and so she has to make all this extra insulin. Insulin crosses the placental barrier, and so the baby is also getting all this stimulus, and their pancreas is massive, and there's all this sugar hanging around, right? And so their pancreas produces too much insulin, and the name of this illness is called nitidoblastosis. And when you hear nitidoblastosis, sure, right? Why not? I'll throw a couple of random consonants together and schmishmidio, whatevs. But then if you look at the word, right, and you look at the etymology of it, nisidio means isles, like little islands. And then blast is a new thing, right? And then osis is, can't remember, but it's essentially new islets, like the islet cells in the pancreas, because you need a whole bunch of those to make insulin. So you have a whole bunch of new islet cells. And I was like, oh my goodness, like the word itself is teaching me. And that happens sometimes. That's something I like to do. I like to give things enough context that they're able to stick in my brain. And the problem with that is that you got to get all that context in there too, but to make the context something interesting, it can help you out. So that would be my answer. You learn it one thing at a time. And if you give it more context, and you have to build that context, but if you give it that context, it stays with you longer and you can bring it back, and it helps.
Thank you for that answer. Thank you. We have another question on the chat. Can you ask him, what did you do to build your resume, and what was your first job initially? And what did you have to do to balance work and college work? And we totally did not work on our resumes while we were working at Kemper County.
Never. No, you do not do that. So a resume is a tool, right? And if you think of it as a tool, then tools are specific to the jobs that you're using them for, right? If you're using a hammer to put in a screw, that's not going to go so great. You might still get it in, but you're not using the right tool, right? So I pruned, let's say, my resume so that it would present the most appropriate information for the position that I was applying to, right? And so you highlight those different parts, right? You don't have to lie about things. That's a terrible idea. But what you can do is you can say, at Cameron County, I worked with COVID. That is true, right? But if I'm applying to a place where I'm going to be making public policy, then I say, well, I worked with COVID with several different institutions at different levels of leadership, right? To develop protocols to respond. That is also true. And that's a solid thing for if I'm applying to a place where I'm going to be writing protocols. If on the other hand, I'm applying to a clinic to work there, right? Then I focus on, I developed, I worked with COVID and I worked with individuals through their illness and helped them find resources so that they could address their needs during the crisis, right? So that's kind of the idea behind the resume. You tailor it specific to the thing that you're applying to. Don't just put one resume out there and just kind of try to make it broadly general and likable. If you make yourself broadly likable, you may be liked by a bunch of people, but you won't be liked so much. You know what I mean? Really try to engage. Was there more to that question?
And you mentioned a couple of first jobs, so he wants to know what your first job was initially and how did you college work?
My first job was I worked in a pharmacy and I filed prescriptions. It was easy. It was mind-numbingly easy. And it was also difficult because it was kind of disheartening that I had already studied like 2 years of medical school. And I went to this pharmacy and I got this job and I was like, all right, what do you guys need from me? And they were like, can you organize these papers alphabetically? And then put them into a file. And I was like, yes, I can do that. They're like, fantastic. We will pay you minimum wage now. So that was my first job. I think it's been more than 10 years, so I don't actually put that on my resume anymore. And your resume, I don't think always does it have to fill in all the gaps? I feel like in your resume, you can leave some gaps there, but then when you're doing like your employment history in an application there, you have to go back and fill in all the gaps, but your resume doesn't necessarily have to have that you worked one summer at like an ice cream stand. Unless you find a really good way to spin it, then put it in there.
So would you like to tell us that lovely story about while you're working at the pharmacy, when you finished your work early? What did you do?
Oh yeah. So when I started at that place, I was already 3 months behind because the person before me that had the job, they were 3 months behind and then they left and then I got the job. So it took me about a month to learn how to do my job and learn how to do it well enough that I was able to do my work and also catch up on all that other work. And so in 1 month, I did theoretically 4 months worth of work, right? So the next day that I had finished that work, I was so excited because I was going to get there, do my work. And that's what I did. I got there, I sat down, I got all the things that I had to file away. Boom, 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 boom. It took me about an hour, finished, and then I left home. And one of my work friends called me and they were like, hey, where are you? And I was like, I'm at home. And so they were like, why? And I was like, well, I finished my work, so why would I have stayed? I was also asked them if they were going to pay me for all the hours, because originally I had understood that I was supposed to go in for 6 hours and I had 6 hours to do that one task. At which point they informed me that that was not how it worked, that I had to go back to work and they would find new tasks to fill my day. And that was kind of demoralizing. And it made my job so much harder. Ever after that, I had a really hard time kind of doing my work that quickly.
Yeah, Yep, that'll do it to you. That'll do it to you. It's a very interesting story because I think that oftentimes people want to work that way where you're efficient, but sometimes that's not how things are set up. And we work 8 to 5 sometimes, and what you're supposed to stay at work all day. And so I think that's a really important story to talk about because I've seen this in some of our lab assistants where they'll sit there and watch, things stir because we have to put in our hours. And I think that, right now we can start thinking about this as maybe we don't have to spend so much time at work. Maybe if we work more efficiently, if we had the motivation to, we might be able to spend more time at home for the same amount of pay. I mean, so long as the work gets done, right? It's just some thoughts. But thank
Definitely
you.
a good thing. And you guys are going to be leaders at some point, right? You're going to keep going through time, and you'll find yourself in positions of leadership. And, that gives you a chance to kind of explore a new path. I think I saw a question in the chat from Valeria
Yes.
about knowing whether or not something is the right path.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Valeria, okay, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead if you want to read the question.
Yes, so to add on what Alexi said, I want to thank you for being so detailed on with your journey and how you were real about jumping from path to path, from different paths. And she's always had a different major in the back of her head, and she wonders if maybe nursing is the right thing for her. How did you know that this was the right path for you?
So the answer to that, Valeria, is I don't. And that's okay, right? Like I love medicine. There's certain parts of it that are great. And I find that in most jobs that I've had, I'm able to find things about that position that I love and that I'm able to do. But ultimately what brought me to medicine was that it aligned the most with the values that I hold dear, right? And I don't know if those values are always going to be aligned with this work. And if they're not, then I'm going to have to take a hard look and see what I do or don't do, because talking about those real parts of life, right? My wife, she didn't marry me to be a doctor, but that was part of our plan, right? The plan has always been for me to finish medicine and be a physician and have what a physician makes and the kind of time that a physician has, right? And so it's not as simple as just, as you continue to make roots and become attached, it can be challenging to say, do I jump, don't I jump? Or, hey, you know what, I've already put 2 years, 3 years, 6 years into this path, but I'm not sure it's what's best for me. And so that's where our values come in, and they guide us like a compass, right? So things that are valuable to me, what do I hold dear? Family, right? Connection with meaning, right? Intellectuality, like I just love knowing things, right? Critical thinking. Those are things that I love, that I enjoy, that are important to me. And as I map out my path, I keep those in mind, but I give myself some slack, because sometimes, one of the great things about being a doctor is you have so many paths in front of you. And one of the most difficult things about being a doctor is you have so many paths in front of you, right? And each of those paths is a different chance at success, and it's also a different chance at failure. So don't get married to this idea of what's the right path, right? Instead, think of, what path am I on? What are the things that matter to me? And am I going to be able to have those things on this path? And if the answer is no, then either the things that matter need to change, or the path needs to change. Or maybe you're just not understanding your path well, right? So keeping that in mind, being flexible. Life is very uncertain. And the more you learn to be comfortable with uncertainty, the the more you'll be able to walk on that path and, you know, smooth it out a bit.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff.
Regarding paths, doctor, if I can ask you, do you have a specialty in mind?
So currently I'm in family medicine.
Mhm.
I studied in Mexico. I got to do a whole bunch of different things over there. I'm still learning what the American healthcare system is, what my role will be in it in this position, or if I decide to do anything else. But I can tell you that it's very unlikely, for instance, that I'll do OB, just because the time commitment seems to be, like I said, not aligned with my values, right? So for me, what matters is, am I there for my patient when they need me? But also, am I there for my patient in a way that they can identify? Because being there for my patient when they need me, well, I mean, you know, you're having a heart attack and I head over, I was there, right? But if the heart attack happened, you know, if I'm only there for 3 minutes and then you take off to the hospital and the patient's like, well, why did he even show up, right? So the patient needs to recognize, as part of the relationship that I want, that I'm able to be there for them. And birth takes a long time and is notoriously unscheduled. Even if you're doing a C-section, it can still not quite land on the timeline. So OB is out. Other than that, you know, my goal ultimately is, I will likely end up doing something non-surgical. I'm not currently in a surgical position. I love surgery. It's I don't know if you guys have ever had the chance to be in a surgery or to perform a surgery, but it's essentially, I don't know if you ever played in your neighbor's yard when you weren't supposed to, or in your parents' room when you weren't supposed to, or in that closet that you weren't supposed to go into. Is this feeling of like, I'm hidden and it's exciting. Surgery is that, but with blood inside of people. It's fantastic. But it's not, it doesn't seem to align with the things that I value, like spending time consistently with my family, my wife, my daughter, right? I don't know a lot of surgeons, and maybe that's just my limited experience, but I don't know a lot of surgeons who didn't have 2-3 divorces under their belt. That's what I saw. And it's not that having divorces under your belt is bad. It's just, it's not what I'm going for. So I choose those things that lead me towards that. So probably hospitalist, family medicine
ER.
clinic. Oh God, I love the ER. The
I
ER is
work
a
in one.
difficult one. The ER is a difficult one. The ER costs, and it costs you your compassion. And if you have a big source and you can refresh it, you can do a lot of great things there. But you can also do a lot of bad things there, right? So for me, ER, if I do it, it will likely be a non-continuous endeavor. It'll be intermittent, right? Maybe I'll do it for a couple of months and then I'll back off. I'll go do something else. And then I'll go and I'll do it again a couple of months here or there, and then I'll back off, because ER does have a heavy toll. Yeah.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah. I've been working at one for 6 years, and I wanted to, along that line, I wanted to thank you on touching base on how long the process can take, and that it's okay that the process can take so long.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to get into PA school, but I did not finish undergrad, so I came back this semester for undergrad after a couple of years, but I've continued to work in the ER to get my shadowing experience through there as a medical scribe. It's been fun. It's been a big learning experience, especially with the chronic disease processes down here. You know, they can teach you a lot. So I've enjoyed being there, and again, wanted to thank you for touching base on the length of time that the process really can take. I know plenty of people that have gone straight through school, right out of high school. Good for them, but I know a few people in my same position too, and it's good to hear from someone else who's gone through it as well. You're muted. Sorry, sir.
Saul, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. It was Justin, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Justin, congratulations, man. congratulations for going back. That was probably not an easy decision to make, and it's not easy, an easy thing to stay there. And whether you make it or not, the fact that you went back is laudable. So way to go on that. We need people who have suffered in medicine. We also need people who succeeded and they're great, but it's really important to have someone there who can sit there and talk to their patient and hear, and and you ask them, so ma'am, have you been taking your diabetes medication? Oh yes, doctor, every day I take it religiously. Okay, all right, but what if we approach this and you don't lie to me? What? Yeah, let's try you being honest. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to tell you something and then you tell me the truth. Okay, so have you been taking your medications? Well, no, right? But it takes time, it takes experience, it takes suffering and having family that has suffered and suffering yourself to know whether or not people are gonna answer truthfully or not. And those skills matter, and they make you a better doctor if you know how to apply them.
Powerful stuff.
Thank you, Doug. That's very, very helpful and heartwarming to hear. It made me tear up a little bit.
All right, good stuff, good stuff. Okay, I think we have another question. Saul, is there anything that you regret doing or not doing when studying or working for your career? This is also from Gabriela.
Gabriela, is there anything I regret? So it is so funny that you asked me that question. I spent a couple of hours trying to find whether there were any good studies on people regretting getting their tubes tied, right? Because we had a patient who came in and she was like 22, 23, and she wanted to get her tubes tied. And everybody was telling her the same thing. Oh, you can't do that. You're 22. You don't even know what you want out of life. As if living more time makes you know what you want out of life. Yeah, no, the concept's ridiculous. So on my own, I decided to go look that up. Now, that question that you asked, is there anything I regret? There's many things that I regret. There's regrets all over the place. I regret I didn't get to spend more time with my dad when he was dying. I regret that I didn't get to spend more time with my dad when he was living. I regret that I didn't get to be there for my mom when she had to go through that, or my brother because I was in medical school. I regret that I don't have the opportunity to see my cousins in Monterrey as often as I want. My aunts, all of them who helped me get through medical school so that they could have a doctor in the family. And I haven't talked to them in years. And you bet I regret it. But that isn't the only thing. Would I change it? One, I can't, right? It's kind of locked in. Two, regret implies that I could have done something else. And regret implies that maybe there was a better path, a more appropriate. If only I should have this. If only I could X. But that's not what happened. And if you wake up every day, Gabriela, and you work hard and you do your best to get through this difficult life, and there's so many difficult things, and it's going to cost you, and that's okay, right? But get up, do your best, work as hard as you can without driving yourself crazy, without costing you yourself and the things that matter to you. That's why it's so important to know what matters to you, to identify your values. That's why that matters so much. Because if you can do that, you might regret things, but you'll also understand that you were doing your best and you'll cut yourself some slack. And we can all use some slack. None of us are perfect. All of us are going to make mistakes. If you go into the medical field, you're going to make mistakes. And those mistakes are going to cost people their life or time with their families. and the consequences can you can extrapolate them infinitely, but that's okay, because we're people and we mess up. And I wake up every day and I do my best, and I recognize that I'm in a position that is very privileged. And yes, I worked hard to get this privilege, but I still recognize that I'm in a position that is privileged, and I hold that dear. That privilege is a gift, and I know that, and I keep that in my mind, so that when I'm in front of my patient and they had a bad day, and they're like, ugh, I don't, whatever it is that they say, that's okay. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you, right? And that keeps me sane, and that keeps me going, and I do my best, and I mess up, and then I do my best again, and then I mess up, and then I do my best again. And you can do that, Gabriela. You can mess up, and then you can do your best, and you can regret things, and you can still do your best, right? It's good.
Wow. Oh, dang it, so crying here. Ah, wow, that was a really remarkable answer. Thank you for that. That I think spoke to all of us. I think we can all agree that definitely applies to everyone here and everyone in general. So thank you for that. That spoke to all of us. All right, wiping these tears. All right. Let's see. David wants to know if purple dye is always used in staining.
It's a fantastic question. David, what I'll tell you is the same thing I tell people. Damien, my bad. Damien, I have no idea. I have not stained a thing with any kind of dye, maybe like 15 years. So I have no clue. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But, it's fun, I'm sure. When I did it back then, it was good times.
All right, good stuff. Does anybody else have any other questions? We have some on the list here. So if no one else has any direct questions, let's see. So what advice would you give someone who's considering this kind of job? How do you even, what kind of advice would you give anybody trying to decide whether or not to go down this path?
What advice would I give somebody who's trying to decide whether or not to go down this path? I would tell them, so I think there's two things that you can do that are going to be really, really important if you decide to go down this path. The first one is to identify your favorite kind of failures. That's going to be great. Failure is a phenomenal teacher. It's not a bad thing to fail. And if you give yourself a favorite kind of failure, a favorite failure, I think that allows you the flexibility and the resilience to kind of like, okay, all right, what can I learn from this? Is this going to be my new favorite failure? Yes or no? So that gives you the flexibility to deal with them, just the load of stress that you'll be dealing with. The second thing is learn to ask good questions. Learn to ask good questions for yourself. Learn to ask good questions for others. I had a patient that we were worried whether or not they had been bleeding in their stool because their hemoglobin kept dropping, and we weren't too sure. And so I asked them, have you had any bleeding in your stool? And they were like, no. But I did poop out some blood a little while ago because I used the word stool and they thought like chair, right? So I did not ask a good question. Learn to ask good questions. Doesn't matter what path you're going down, I think is probably going to be a really good thing. And those two skills, I think those two skills are very appropriate for wanting to become a physician and many, many other things.
Good stuff. Gabriela wants to know if there's any tips, tricks, or advice for anyone who's going through medical school. And what has been your favorite moment with a patient?
Ooh, okay. Tips, tricks, and advice. if I had to give you anything, I would say remember that not everybody studies the same and not everybody learns the same. We spend a lot of time learning to become a thing, a nurse, a doctor, a biologist, but we don't spend a lot of time learning to become students. And at the end of the day, that's what you are right now, right? That's what I am. I'm a student. And if I don't know how to be a student in the best way for me, I'm going to have a hard time. So I think that's the best tip I can give you. As to my favorite moment with a patient, I mean, I don't want to sound all like conceited and whatnot, right? But there's plenty of them. I would say the best one was I was delivering a baby in Mexico. The girl was about 14 or 15 years old. She had been in labor for a long time, but she wasn't dilating anymore. I went, I sat, I talked to her, I answered some questions, I taught her how to breathe, I taught her how to push. Eventually she finished her dilation, took her over to the room. She gave birth to this little baby boy, and I look at her and I said, hey, just to kind of fill the silence, right? Said, hey, so what are you going to name him? And she said, oh, I don't know. And I was like, well, we're in Mexico. It's very traditional to name it after, name your kid after the dad, if it's a boy. And she looked at me and she gave me, and I'm going to look right into the camera for this. She did this one. That loser. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to exit this situation now that I have accidentally brought that up. Right. And so she looked at me and she said, well, what's your name? And I was like, oh, Saul Ruvalcaba. I'm here to help. She said, Saul is a strong name for a boy. And she named her kid after me. And that was a very, very beautiful moment for me. And I think that is definitely one of my favorite moments with a patient.
One of my favorite stories of yours too. Wow, good stuff. Wow.
Hey, Doc,
Well,
if and when you need a PA, I want to be that guy.
Justin, I will keep you in mind, man. You already know my name. So my email is just my first name dot my last name at utrgv.edu, guys. So
Gotcha.
Yes, please reach out to him. He's here. He's part of the university. He's around. So please reach out to someone. He's such a wonderful resource, incredible friend. So we're coming up on an hour, so I'm sure you have stuff to do. So we'll let you get to that. But thank you so much for joining us, for answering all of these questions, and for helping our students connect to medicine, to what the nitty gritty is of this, because otherwise, I mean, how do you know other than, imagining what it's like? And so thank you for that. Thank you for your honesty, and thank you for your time. Thank you. And thank you for your incredible energy that's helping to motivate our students. I think that we got a couple fish that bit the hook here. So
well, thank you so much. And guys, let me tell you something about Viv's here. If I had to rank my my top 10 most influential people that I have ever met, you can bet that Viv's is in the top 3. She's one of the best people I know, and you guys get the opportunity to have her as a teacher. And you should take full advantage of that because she is phenomenal. It is so easy to be as excellent as Viv's is, and to just kind of say, maybe I'll just coast a little bit. And she is not like that at all. She makes the best of every day. And every day that I got to work with her was my best day. So take advantage of the time you have with her. She's of the best people.
Thank you so much. So I introduced you, and I feel the same way. You're such an incredible human being. And guys, this is what it's about, finding these people who inspire you, who motivate you, and who you can work with to make things like this happen. We're all just kind of going through life trying to make this place a better place. And if you can find the people who think like that, who want to do that, you'll be surprised how much nicer your days are. Thank you so much for making days that were very difficult so much more bearable. And we really, I think that it's going through intense hardship really forges strong bonds. And I'm so grateful for the intensity of these situations that we had to go through as epis in Cameron County.
Mhm.
And I truly admire and respect you, Saul. You are such an incredible human being, and I was so delighted to be able to share you with all of these wonderful students, because you're such a wonderful human yourself. And so, thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And we'll keep talking.
I will. You guys take care.
Bye.